Good evening. We're so glad that you made the decision to come out tonight on this beautiful night. I think we got some snow and nasty stuff this rest of this week, but coming out tonight, choosing the opportunity to hear or learn more about Forward in Faith vision for ministry here at New Life Christian Church, chosen as the scripture verse for the theme of the campaign was Acts 1:8, and I'm going to paraphrase, but you will receive power, or power will come upon you, and you will bear witness to me throughout the world, in Winchester, in Frederick County, in Virginia, in the United States, in the world. So our hope and prayer is tonight you will learn how we're going to transform that Forward in Faith into a ministry to reach out to the people of this city, the state, and the world. You received, as you came in tonight, a bag, and there's a couple things in there, but the two things that I want to point out, first of all, is there is a prayer request card. You're going to hear more about that from Craig when he comes up, but specifically for me, the Vision Night card for questions. You're going to see a video here pretty quick after Craig comes up and prays and makes a few other announcements. Take the opportunity during the video, if questions arise, or something that you might have thought of as the campaign has been progressing, to go ahead and jot that down. You don't have to turn it in as soon as the video is over. You'll have the evening to do that. There'll be 4 or 5 of us in the back that will have gray containers to collect cards, and we'll make sure that those get up to Craig before the night's over. And even after, if you're thinking about it, there's an opportunity to fill out a card later and bring it up or give it to Craig even next week. We want to make sure that your questions are answered. So thank you.
Like 2 seconds ago, my wife said, "You wearing a microphone?" No, ma'am. Well, we're glad you're here. Let's pray together. And like Mike said, this is the only time we're taking questions. It's an opportunity. If you want to write it down now, if you think of something anytime, write it down. And we want to have that opportunity, but we'll get to that. We got some pretty cool stuff to show you first. And so let's pray, and we'll get started. God, we are thankful for another day. I am thankful for the sunshine today. Even as it's cooled down tonight, it was such a beautiful day and a reminder that spring is coming, that your earth, your creation is being refreshed as we speak. And we're thankful for that. I pray we wouldn't miss the beauty in that that is yours. And God, we're thankful for services this morning, for the opportunity to worship together and to be challenged about where our reason for loving one another comes from and how that's supposed to overflow out of us. I pray that you would continue to challenge us with your word in that way. And God, we're thankful for this opportunity to talk about the future. God, to celebrate everything that you've done, but to look forward to what you're going to do. And God, we can't go anywhere without you. And so we're thankful that our goal through all of this has been to move forward with our faith firmly placed in you. Bless our time tonight as we spend it together. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Very clearly, it is only by the grace and provision of God that we sit where we sit today. It is only by the grace and provision of God that there is a New Life Christian Church. It is only by the grace and provision of God that New Life has been able to grow and have a significant impact in our community and around the world. We did not make that happen. God made that happen.
Throughout our entire journey, God was clearly with us in the beginning, and our first impromptu meeting was held under a picnic shelter at the Jim Barnett Park. There were 23 of us who gathered on that first Sunday. We had prayer, a lot of prayer, read scripture, and then we discussed the possibility of forming a new congregation. Now this time, we met at the Pepper Tree Apartment Clubhouse. At this gathering, 77 people assembled. Once again, I don't know how they all got there. These 77 people went on to meet together at various locations, including Sharando Park, Jameswood Middle School, their auditorium, and the Robinson Elementary School cafeteria. We began meeting at Winchester Medical Center's Conference Center. On that day, 88 people signed a charter, and New Life Christian Church actually began. We later moved to Kern Toyota showroom, and we utilized various available rooms for Sunday school space, and even had an adult class meeting in the middle of the mechanical shop. The UAW building became available, giving us adequate parking and a much larger auditorium space. We were actually able to purchase the first 5 acres of property here on Middle Road, beginning construction in 2001. To begin a new church was a major step for all of us. To make the financial commitment of purchasing property and building a new building was a major step. When we moved into this building and the church really began to grow, churches, there's a number of different kinds of names. Location's one. Others are named for biblical locations. Other churches were named after a biblical doctrine, like grace. One thing that we noticed about people and why they didn't go to church is they felt like they were judged. And so we chose the name New Life. We determined that a lot of people had a lot of bad church experiences and quit church. And so we wanted a church of new life where they could begin their new life.
Where we landed was here in Winchester on Middle Road. I soon realized, not long after that God put us there because we had not been going to church. I had not been going to church for years.
And as we joined New Life and as we started to participate in the events, it just started to become more and more of a home to us. So it did not take long for us to realize that this is a place that we wanted to be.
God has used New Life to just help my family feel loved and important.
My son was friends with a couple of the teens that were already here, and he went to church with them, and he really loved going to the modular. And then I came to some services, and then I loved the services, everybody that was so welcoming.
Excited to be able to be part of a life group and be able to make friends and have fellowship again, not just on Sundays, but throughout the week.
Being here 17 years, being involved in the teen ministry for as long as I have, being involved with the worship team, even just leading a life group and the conversations that we've been able to have and the friendships that we've developed over the years.
Also the women's night events that we have.
I really have enjoyed the men's meetings.
My life group on Wednesday nights, I've just developed close friendships with all of the girls in there.
I also enjoyed playing softball with the guys quite a bit on the softball team.
The people that I've had the blessing to work with and that I work with now are family to me, and we feel like we as a staff are family with you all.
Whether it is just going and having some delicious mac and cheese and fried chicken, or if it's watching a bunch of guys go out there and play kickball while the kids are jumping on the bouncy houses, it's just a fun collective experience, I think, for a body of believers to be able to just spend intentional time in community together.
If they walk through our doors, if they come onto the campus of New Life Christian Church for any reason, we need to make sure that they have an opportunity to meet Jesus through our people, through the worship, through the teaching, through the entire experience, through the carnival, through the Easter egg hunt, even if they come in during the week, through walking through the office. We need to make sure that they meet Jesus through us.
Ken helped me see the importance of the church making a difference in the world around us, beginning with our local community.
Taking as much of what we do outside of our walls as we've been able to do takes some faith. There is safety inside the church walls, but when you can go to the community with some of the projects that we've done and plugging individuals into their own opportunities to serve in our community, we're taking church beyond the walls because really that's where it belongs.
Together with my life group, serving meals at the mission has been very rewarding as well.
I've also really appreciated the service aspect of New Life. Just the way that we have so many service projects throughout the year has been a really great way to add to the community.
I had never thought about going over to another country to do some mission work, and I ended up going to Haiti.
A church where people meet Jesus, whether they come to us or we go to them. You see, as long as there are people who do not know Jesus as their Savior, we will still have a mission to reach the lost.
I was coming to church by myself for probably 2 years or so, and then Debbie started coming with me. Debbie, who never had church in her life, she was so excited about it. I couldn't believe her reactions after church and the questions she would ask and the things that we would discuss. And she finally came to be baptized at New Life. And that was the most joyful thing.
The New Life Christian Church needs to be a church where people meet Jesus. That is where our mission comes from, to reach the lost. And I'll tell you this, that's the reason we want to build a new facility on our property. It's about creating more space for people to come and learn about Jesus, to grow in their faith, to connect with other believers, and then to go back out into the world with the same message that first reached them.
I'm excited about this church and the growth that we have coming up.
Whenever it comes to things that excite me about the future for New Life, I think of the incredible opportunities that we have had here in this present space, in this present building, and being able to have more space to do more ministry and working really hard to bring Christ's kingdom here to earth. It very much excites me. This past fall, we welcomed our little boy Ezekiel into our family, and it excites me to know that New Life is going to be a place where we can feel encouraged and affirmed in knowing that he's going to get to know who Jesus is, know that Jesus loves him, and there are great things in store for him, I'd say.
I'm excited to see the expansion of just the kids ministry and the youth group ministry, as I know they're all kind of crammed in the building. And
Can't wait to see how each individual ministry kind of takes off.
But the truth is, this is about gaining space. More space for our Sunday worship services, more space for our student ministry, more space for our kids ministry, more space for special events, more space to bless the community as well, especially in ways we've never been able to before because of spatial issues. And more space, understand, more space means more people, and more people coming means more people hearing about Jesus and being challenged to grow in their faith. And more people coming and being challenged means more people going and sharing the light of Jesus. As we go about reaching the lost for Jesus, as we forward the greatest message we could ever forward, the people we reach need a place to connect, a body of believers to become a part of, a safe place to grow and learn. And we want to make sure there is always a place for them here at New Life. That's what this is about. And it's all for the sake of the kingdom and for the glory of God.
One thing that would make me so very happy through this campaign would be for the church to pull completely together and be unified and everyone give what they could.
And I want to help and I want to be involved any way I can. This church has done so much for me that it's the least I can do to give back.
I encourage you today to stop and ask God what he would have you bring to the table, what he would have you do, what he would have you give, whether that's your time, your energy, your resources, your skills and talents that he has blessed you with, and yes, your money. Because we're going somewhere and God has great things ahead.
Well, I want to thank everybody who had any role in that video.
especially Rebecca Hott, who put it together for us and did so in fairly much record time. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Everybody who volunteered to be on camera, I know that's not an easy thing. Everybody who helped us find some of that archive footage and pictures and things like that. But we're just, that really is a very, to me, about the perfect expression of what we're trying to do here, that it's important that we look and say, here's where God has brought us. Here's what God has brought us through. Here's the route God has taken us on. Why would we think anything other than God is still leading this moving forward? And so we feel like before we even talk about what we want to do and what our plans are, the best thing we could do is express that thanks to God through a time of singing together. So I invite you to sing with us.
Yes, feel free to stand up.
Come, let us worship our King. Come, let us bow at His feet. He has done great things. See what our Savior has done. See how His love overcomes. He has done great things. He has done great things. Oh, hero of heaven, you conquered the grave. You free every captive and break every chain. Oh God, you have done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high. Oh God, you have done great things. You've been faithful through every storm. You'll be faithful forevermore. You have done great things, and I know you will do it again. For your promise is yes and amen. You will do great things. God, you do great things. Oh, hero of heaven, you conquered the grave. You free every captive and break every chain. Oh God, you have done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high. Oh God, you have done great things. Hallelujah, God, above it all. Hallelujah, God, unshakable. Hallelujah, you have done great things. Hallelujah, God, above it all. Hallelujah, God, unshakable. Hallelujah, you have done great things. You've done great things. Oh, hero of heaven, you conquered the grave. You free every captive and break every chain. Oh God, you have done great things. We dance in your freedom, awake and alive. Oh Jesus, our Savior, your name lifted high. Oh God, you have done great things. You have done great things. Oh God, you do great you part. By your blood we're free. You give mercy every morning. It's to you we sing. We trust in your mighty right hand. It's by your power we stand. Nothing impossible for you. You do what you say you'll do. We'll go where you tell us to. Forward in faith, led by the God who saves. He who promised is faithful. 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 We trust in your mighty right hand. It's by your power we stand. Nothing impossible for you. You do what you say you'll do. We'll go where you tell us to. Forward in faith, led by the God who saves. You are the God who saves.
Nothing is impossible for God, but Stacy cannot lead 4 sets of music in one day. And I know y'all know this next one, so you're just gonna have to sing it out real loud.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire, and in darkest night, you are close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God.
You may be seated.
Absolutely want to thank our worship team and our sound tech booth staff that have given a lot of extra effort and a couple extra nights to this. Thank you guys so much for your willingness to serve in that way. And you can tell we've already done this because those that are supposed to be coming up here are already coming. So good work, gentlemen. You guys want to do a first collection? If anybody's got a If anybody's already got a question written down, just hold it up in the air with your card, and the guys would be happy to get it. There may not be anybody yet. That's okay. No problem. Just want to give you that chance while we're getting settled. I'd like to introduce to you everybody that's up here, and then we will kind of jump into a presentation, and then we'll do questions after the presentation. So this is Greg Humphreys, one of our elders, Dean Whitaker, another of our elders, Todd Veach, who is the director of our capital campaign team, Dewey Sink, one of our elders, and Paul Carper, our expert construction consultant. I've changed this both times now. I've said it. How do I describe Paul? He has most of the answers that we don't understand when it comes to construction. But Paul has been a huge asset to this process and has led us through a lot of these pieces and really knows his stuff, and you'll hear from him quite a bit here. Incidentally, hold on. I don't know what happened. Sorry. I could not be more thrilled that y'all are here tonight. In fact, I think I can speak for all of us when I say I think we're pretty happy with the turnout between the 2 nights so far. That means you care, and that means something to us for sure. It is always a blessing to be able to worship together and celebrate what God has done, what God is doing, and what God will do ongoing. We are excited about the path that God has taken us on to this point, and excited about where He is leading us. I want to thank our capital campaign team because they've done a fantastic job along the way producing things like the fact sheet and the brochure that I know began to kind of whet your appetite for what it was we were looking at doing. Everything you received tonight in the bag, they put that together, and they as a team are still working on the last few aspects of the campaign that are still to come. To take you back to the beginning would actually to be go all the way back to the beginning of New Life that Larry spoke about in the video. Before New Life had a permanent meeting place, God was at work, guiding our path. As New Life was able to purchase this land that this building sits upon, God was at work. As New Life was able to build this building and purchase additional acreage, God was at work. For years, even just in my time here, which is approaching 11 years now, we have talked consistently about what we could do, what we might do, what we should do, when all of the factors converged and God told us it was time to move forward. At the beginning of 2019, which seems like a really long time ago now, doesn't it? Those factors we had long talked about did converge, and we felt like God was calling us to take a step of faith. That step started with a variety of meetings between myself and the elders, the staff, experts, but then it officially started on May 19th, 2019, with the first meeting of what we called the planning team. Through meetings with the planning team, which was made up of the elders, staff, church council, ministry team leaders, and other key volunteers, we went through some exercises designed to help determine our true priorities. Under the leadership of the elders and myself, and with input from the rest of the team, we were able to begin to move from conversations and exercises to basic plans. All along, we had been in constant contact with our existing lender and ministry partner, Christian Financial Resources. CFR consulted on our plans and evaluated our financial situation, confirming that from a financial standpoint, it was a good time for us to consider the possibility of building. We entered into an agreement with Christian Financial Resources to lead us through the capital campaign that we are still in the midst of. And eventually we moved to the phase of creating final plans with Construction Management, Inc. In the midst of all of this happening was COVID. It made a lot of things more difficult in all of our lives, and it made this process more complicated as well. In fact, it kind of paused the whole process on some level. Meetings were out, gatherings really of any kind were out for a while, but all along, God was still nudging us, and the elders and I still believed that we were on the right track. We continued to work in the background, praying, planning, waiting, watching, and praying some more, trying to decide when the right time to move forward was, which, as you know, we believe is now. When we actually began to talk about the building, there were some basic planning criteria that came up initially in our conversation. These were the base things that guided our initial process. We knew that the most urgent need was space, and that meant both assembly space and classroom space, as well as parking. Those of you that were here, I know that things are different now, but we would anticipate things returning to something similar to pre-COVID eventually. And at that point, if you were a part of the second or the third service, you know there wasn't a lot of space for parking in between. There wasn't hardly any space in this room during second service, and our kids' ministry was full for second and third. And so we were feeling that crunch, and so we needed all of that space to be expanded. The second thing that kind of guided our functionality was we did not want to build an auditorium that seated more than 300 to 350 people. Part of the reason for that is, for years, people that have come to be a part of New Life have said, it feels like home, I feel like I know people, I don't want us to be so gigantic that I can't know everybody. We have to balance that feeling that I love just as much as you with also the desire to make sure that there is space for everybody who wants to come and be a part of the family here at New Life. The most urgent long-term growth area was certainly our student and kids ministry. For a long time, we had gotten a lot out of the small amount of space we had for each of those, and so we needed to look at the long-term growth area as student and kids ministry. And then our existing land area at 10 acres was considered to be sufficiently large for developing the land. Some of you may not realize this, so I'll tell you real quick. On this picture, you'll see a lot of people assume that the wood line that runs behind the church and over into the L-shaped field is the property line. That is not the property line. The property line, if you can see, is the line that runs through the woods. And so it goes back at an angle, creating a much wider end to that end of the L, which is how there is 10 acres here, not just the open field. So we have 10 acres here, and we consider that to be sufficient for planned development. One thing that was made clear early was that there was no effective or practical way to add on to this building in a way that would give us the space we needed where it currently sits on the property. Additionally, it was made clear that while the modular building that the student ministry has used for a long time was in surprisingly good shape for its age, it was simply not meant to last forever and therefore won't last forever and could not be counted on as permanent space. Additionally, because we do not have access to public water, we have square footage limitations within a single building without the need to add a sprinkler system. And on a well, if we had to add a sprinkler system, we would require a significant chunk of square footage to be used for the sole purpose of housing a sprinkler system holding tank. If you've seen these in any decently large building, you understand why that's simply not a practical option for us right now. So with those basic parameters, we began to dream about what was possible. So again, this is an overhead view of our property, and you're going to be able to see some of what's on the screen. Some of it's a little small, but once this is over the next 2 weeks, all of the stuff that we have visually will be displayed in the building in a place where you can look more closely at it. This is kind of our unveiling, and then we'll have it up for you to see. So if there's something you can't see, you should get a chance eventually. But again, this is an overhead view of our property. as it currently sits. And then I think we zoom in, or no, that is the best location based on all of those parameters that we feel that we can place a building and parking to allow for existing easements that are on the property, existing utilities, and also to give us room for future building growth should that become a need. We can zoom in on that a little bit with the next slide. Again, I know if you can't see it, don't worry. We'll give you the opportunity in the next couple of weeks to see a much closer view of all of this. But in order to add a building the size we need, parking to support it, and honor all those things around it, that was the location. And so what you have on the building there is kind of a zoomed in view of that. The red is the existing church building. The red up here is the modular and the shed. The yellow is our existing parking and driveway. And so the brown then would be the new facility, and the blue would be the parking that would support the expansion parking supporting that new facility. That road does need to remain as a fire road, but that is the best location set there. Offset the building. This would become kind of the hub for everything. This side of this building and the front of that building right out this way. The basic, that would actually, in that way, would increase our parking from 83 to 139 spaces. The basic floor plan on the next sheet here is a 9,500 square foot building with 4,000 square feet as an assembly space, the auditorium. The max seating in that area will be 350. There'll be a stage with storage next to it, as well as a sound booth in the back of the room. The new building also includes a 1,900 square foot lobby, men's and women's restrooms, our nursery and toddler area, a kitchen and storage utility area, and a mezzanine located on the second level that will house our mechanical equipment. Now, I could show you this all day long. I could talk about it all day long, but I think the next few slides will be more effective in helping you visualize the size difference between this building. Because this is the same floor plan that was just up. But beginning on your left, the red is the existing platform area. So you can see how much larger that will be. The yellow is our existing assembly area, the room you currently sit in. Now, obviously, it's in a different shape. These things are not necessarily shaped the same, but it's to show you how much more space there will be. The red on this side is the existing nursery toddler area, which you can see will be nearly twice as large. And then the blue is the existing lobby area. Again, obviously not the same shape, but it shows you just how much more space would be allowed in there. Additionally, this new building will have a higher roof, creating more vertical space in all of these different spaces. Again, to show you the difference, on the side, the blue on your left is the existing lobby within the space of the new one, and the blue on the right is the existing assembly area shown within the view of the larger building. And Paul's going to explain a little more in detail about what that would look like in a few moments here. We also wanted to show you a couple artist renderings. That's the front of the new building as you would see it. As you can imagine, these are not exactly what everything will look like, but this gives you a new idea, or an idea of the new building on its own, as it will look straight on, and then from the road, how the two buildings will offset from one another in that way. Before I keep going, and before I have Paul share a little extra with you here, Paul Butcher kindly volunteered to create us a digital walkthrough of the planned space. And so we want to show you that video. It's very brief, but it's very cool. And I will note for you that the goal is to give you a feel for walking into and through the space. And so finishes and details are there for the experience and for scale, but will not necessarily reflect the exact details. But again, I want to thank Paul for putting this together for us. As you can see, it is very basic, and that is on purpose. We want to put our money into square footage for functionality and flexibility, and Paul's going to share a little bit about what some of those details are here in a minute. The question that comes up next then will be, okay, what about this building? Well, as you know, this is the existing floor plan where we currently sit, or will be on the screen, currently housing everything on Sunday morning that we do except for our student ministry services. And so we need to then repurpose this building to best use its square footage. And so the new layout that we will be creating in this building will be divided approximately half for our student ministry and half for our children's ministry. And you might say, well, that's not very much gain for the children's ministry, but I want you to keep in mind a couple of things. Number one, the nursery and toddler age kids will not be in this building. They will be in the main building with the adults. And that will allow spread into 2 additional classrooms. And additionally, future construction within this building, which is much minor because it's an existing structure, will allow us to even utilize hallway space better, differently, combined rooms, some of those kinds of things. Our initial construction focus will be on the new building, but there will be some configuration we can do to this building as finances and time allow to make it more useful. One major advantage that I want to make sure I highlight to the split building thought process is that we will be able to do something for our children's ministry, especially, that we have never been able to do before, which is to fully lock it down on Sunday morning if we needed to. It will only be accessible on Sunday morning through a secure check-in and check-out process, and in the event of any kind of an emergency, it could be completely locked down. This building will not be a walk-through space. It will be an enter only as allowed space, which benefits both ministries. And I can tell you that even as we speak, even as the days have gone by in the last week, Gavin and Anthony are working together daily on new systems and plans that will make Sunday mornings function at their best. And they'll be bringing volunteers and parents into the conversation soon. In the long run, by placing the new facility where we plan to on the property, it will give us further future growth opportunities more adjacent to the adult building for future potential expansion phases, specifically relating to children's ministry. And so all plans have been made with that long view in mind. From a financial perspective, we are in a position to move forward in this way. I can tell you tonight that your generosity is such an inspiration to me. You all, even in the midst of COVID, have been so generous in your regular giving and in project giving that it absolutely blows my mind on a regular basis. Our general fund giving for the year 2020, despite the fact that it was the year 2020, was $524,000, so more than $500,000 in general fund giving. Because we were able to keep expenses down and because COVID allowed us to keep them down even more, our output for 2020 was only $453,000. That output includes all of our services and programming, facility upkeep, staff salaries and benefits, and our significant give back to our local, domestic, and international mission partners, as well as our individual benevolence program. Over the last several years, again, because of your generosity, our church council has led us in being able to increase the amount in our savings account to more than $130,000 while maintaining operating expenses within our checking account. We do have an existing outstanding balance with CFR on this building, but the reason we didn't pay that off is because CFR suggested we keep cash on hand. Thanks to your generosity, we could have zeroed that balance, but their recommendation was to roll it into the new loan to keep more cash on hand through this process. Therefore, between what council has saved and what we will raise with this capital campaign, we have no reason to believe that we could not sustain financing with CFR for up to $2 million. The beauty is, everything that we raise will lower that number, freeing us up even more as we continue to move forward. Taking on a new mortgage and moving forward with this project will require congregational approval. And we will hold a congregational meeting on Sunday, April 11th to make this decision, because at that point, we will have a much clearer number to present based on Commitment Sunday. That's why we're asking you to consider what God would have you give. There's a giving chart in your brochure that shows a lot about our potential to reach a significant amount that will offset the cost of this building. Now, if you have tried to read that chart, it may have been a little bit confusing, and you may have been intimidated by it suggesting that somebody should give $100,000. If somebody would like to give $100,000, I'm cool with that, okay? Let me go on record tonight. If you've got that kind of scratch and you want to write a check, I will gladly take that and put it towards the building. But the idea is each of us are in a different place. Each of us have different abilities to give. It's together that we can make a huge impact and cut that number down as low as possible, which will help us to move forward even sooner, and it will keep us moving forward responsibly while at the same time taking a bold step of faith. Each of us has a place in this process, and together, I believe God will accomplish great things through us. Now, Paul's going to share a little bit with you about some of the finishes and some of the cool details that we've added into the design that I'm pretty excited about. So, Paul?
Thank you, Craig. Can you hear me okay? The one thing I want to clarify, the other Paul that he was talking about that did the three-dimensional walkthrough, I'm not that Paul. There's another Paul that did that. So I just want to clarify that aspect, because if I had to do that, we would still be waiting on the development of that three-dimensional drawing. Just want to clarify that to begin with. What I wanted to do is go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the finishes and also maybe address some of the questions that were brought up in the previous meeting that we had on Wednesday night. If we could go back to the original site plan, the one that has a smaller one that shows both buildings on one site, and maybe start there and then go through the plans. And I'm not going to go back through everything, but just want to talk about some of the decisions that were made and absolutely everything else. Thank you. One of the questions that was brought up is, obviously this building is going to be located on the back side of the property. So if you're driving by, the first thing that you will see once you come in, you will see this building. Well, how do I know where I'm supposed to go if that is going to be where worship will take place? And this is the student and children's ministry building. I'm sure you've all been on facilities that have had multiple buildings on them. And the easiest way to do that and the most effective way to do it is through signage. And it's very simple. I would imagine most of you have been to Winchester Memorial Hospital, the complex. You see all the buildings there. You know, there's signage which directs you around. Obviously, this is a much smaller, it's a microcosm of what takes place there, but it's easy enough once you come in to have directional signage which shares with you, where this takes place, and obviously we'll be able to do signage in front. If you looked at the rendering, I very quickly put on there, and obviously a determination can be made as to what that would be called, but obviously you could have worship center and you could have educational facility, which will be very descriptive and give people direction. So that's simple enough in terms of resolving that issue of what takes place where. If we go to the next one very briefly, the building itself, obviously we have the existing parking, which will be on both sides of this building. We have the fire lane, which goes around back. Obviously, we'll be able to go ahead between the two buildings. And one of the issues that we talked about extensively during the design process was how do we safely get people from one building to the next? Obviously, there's the potential of cars going around the back. The one thing that we talked about, and we talked about this during the planning process with the engineer, the county will allow us to put bollards with a chain across that, which will prohibit cars during the time period going through there, so it will be a safe passage from that building to this building. If there's a fire, obviously a fire truck can very easily get through a small chain link fence, but obviously, again, we could put through there, do not enter, no parking on a sign, which we would close off that back side. And obviously, you would still have this parking area over here, as well as parking area here, and then the new parking, which will be located on the side of the building, which will give you flexibility in terms of where you park and getting to it and absolutely everything else. If we go to the next one in terms of the floor plan, very briefly, from the very beginning of the discussion, we talked about the direction we wanted to take in terms of the appearance of the building. The one thing that we talked about, again, this was in great detail, we wanted to strive to get the most square footage we could for and I don't want to say the cheapest, but the least possible cost, obviously associated with it. If we did something that was very elaborate, obviously the cost is going to be far greater. The new building that we're going to have is going to be very similar in terms of construction type to this building. It's going to be a metal building frame. If you watch the initial video that was taking place where Larry had the discussion, you saw this building in the very initial stages where you had the concrete slab and pretty much the structure going up and absolutely everything in it. That is pretty much what the inside of the new building will look like, but there will be some additional finishes. For example, the lobby area, once you walk in and that wall that you face in the lobby, that will be a full height wall that will be completely, it'll be gypsum wallboard. It'll be very similar to what you have on here, it'll be finished. But the other walls within that space are going to be partial height finish, so there will be the insulation which will be exposed up above, and it will be black. But I can share with you, I wanted to make sure that the staff as well as the leadership understood the direction we were going in, and we visited a facility which was very similar to this. The contractor that is working on this, going to be working on the new building, was doing another facility very similar to this, and we took it, and I can share with you that the interior space is going to be very nice. You will obviously notice if you look hard enough at it in terms of the finishes, but obviously you will not notice to the great extent that it doesn't look like insulation that you have on the inside of your house. It has to have a flame spread rating and a fire rating and an assembly space, so it is pretty much a finished material that will be on that insulation. The floor is going to be polished concrete, and if you're familiar, you may be familiar or you may not be familiar with polished concrete. If you go into Lowe's or Martin's or any type of large commercial facility, that is the type of floor they have in those facilities. I can share with you that it's used in school systems and it's used in assembly complexes, and it's very durable. It's very, not I won't say inexpensive, but very cost effective in terms of what you pay. And it allows a variety of usage to take place inside. And that was part of what we were trying to strive to do in terms of the overall flexibility of the space and to get as many things as we could in terms of the functionality and absolutely everything within that area. A couple other things that we added within the overall space is that between the lobby area and between the assembly area, we have an overhead door, which it's a 12-foot wide by 14-foot high overhead door that can be rolled up, which gives you a transparency between that lobby area and the large assembly space. Why did we do that? Not primarily because of, but obviously the one idea that we had was, for example, the Children's Carnival. You have a 1,900 square foot lobby area, which is separated by assembly area, which is about 4,000 square feet. When you open that up, you effectively have almost 6,000 square feet of space that you can use in a function such as a children's carnival, which gives you far more flexibility of space and usage of the overall facility itself. We also added an overhead door at the very back of the space, which opens into the property on the back side. And the idea was that if we had, for example, a picnic, you could have you had individuals that probably could not go outside, they could still go ahead and participate in the picnic or other function by being inside, but still you have that inside-outside space by having the two connected. So it gave a little more versatility. And as Anthony, as we were over at the facility, which had the overhead doors, and I was sharing this, Anthony came up with a brilliant idea. He said, so we can pull a truck into there. And obviously we can, in terms of delivery of materials, chairs. Think of how many times you had a facility like this, and you had to end up carrying chairs, tables, and everything else through a door, through a double pair of doors and everything else. Obviously, in this particular circumstance, because we do have a concrete slab as the finished surface, as long as the tires were clean, obviously you could go ahead and bring and we would make sure that the tires were clean, obviously, before you did that. But obviously you could back it in, you could unload, and you could set up for whatever function that you may have going on in there. The other great thing about this is, and I'll get it right this time in terms of watts, the one thing that we added is in each one of the restrooms, we have a shower in each one of those facilities. And I take it everyone is familiar with Watts, but it's a program which you bring in homeless individuals for a period of time, and you allow them, and it's typically during the winter months, at least, and I'm going from what we did in Richmond. We had a program called Caritas in Richmond, and you would host those individuals. It would either be all women or all men, and you would host them for a period of time, homeless individuals during the wintertime, and they would have some place to shower and to bathe and to use those facilities. So in terms of the flexibility of the space and the use of it, obviously there's more outreach and more opportunities to do functions such as that. That was one of the things that we talked about when we were talking about the overall design of the facility, and it's very important to remember that. And the example that I used was that when I grew up, I started at Valley Avenue Church of Christ, and we spun off and we had College Park. And if you've ever been to College Park, I remember the day that G.C. Richards, who was the minister at the time, brought the plans to our home. And if you go to College Park, the lobby area or the vestibule is big enough for the minister to stand there and to shake your hand as you're walking out. Over the years, that whole space has changed dramatically in the function of the church itself. Obviously, they were very prudent when they did this facility because the foyer is more of a gathering space, it's more a fellowship space, and it's the usage within the church of that area has changed. There's probably more fellowship that takes place in there than what takes place in this facility on a Sunday. And if any of you have come in on one of the other services and tried to come through there, obviously this is also a linear space, so you have to go against the grain to get in and out. So that was one thing that we cognitively looked at in terms of the overall design of this. If you notice that the lobby space runs parallel to the assembly area, so you have a shorter distance of going out and giving more space, small groups together to stand there and talk, where obviously you have more areas to work in and do other things within that space, whether it's tables to collect information or disseminate information or do whatever you need to do. So that was some very important things we talked about, the overall flexibility of the space, the utilization. And the reason I wanted to bring up the foyer is you never know the direction of the delivery of a worship facility in the future. So you try to take a look at how it can be utilized in the future, but also be transformed and used in the future to the greatest extent possible. The last item that I'll bring up is the assembly area. If we could go to the section real quick, which shows the configuration of this interior space. I apologize, when I did the blue area, I'd forgotten that this area is sloped. The walls on this side are about 9 feet 8 inches tall, and the height of the center area is about 13. The new facility on this side will be 18 feet, and the point at the ridge will be 22 feet. So you can see the three-dimensional aspect of the overall inside is going to be far greater than what this is. And I know sometimes it's difficult to visualize the size of a space, but to give you an idea, for example, go from the face of this wall here all the way back to the face of the wall, past the door right there. That will be the depth of the new assembly area from the face of the stage. So it'll be approximately 56 feet deep, so you will have all that area for seating, and then obviously you will have the stage of the platform area behind that. The width will be 71 feet. This is 48 feet wide here, so essentially it'll be 48 from 71 is 13 feet. So it will obviously be, 23 feet. 23 feet, yeah. Had to do math real quick in my head. Obviously, it'll be much larger in terms of space, and the way the seating is laid out very comfortably, and I use the same dimensions that we have on a Sunday morning here, you can get 350 chairs within that facility. Obviously, as Craig's mentioned previously, initially we will not have 350 in there, but obviously it'll give us some flexibility. But if indeed we did reach that point, obviously we could easily seat 350 within the space. The other thing which I did not mention the last time in terms of tables, that obviously is a very critical aspect. If we had some type of function such as we had with the comedian, musician, the one time or anything like that, we could very easily seat 175 at tables within that area. Maybe able to get more, but it's all based on the spacing in between and absolutely everything else. The inside of the space also, to get to the point here, it will be insulation, obviously exposed up on the inside of the facility. The walls obviously will be painted. That will be partial height. And the lighting will be, they're high bay fixtures. Craig said make sure I don't get too technical in the explanation, but obviously there'll be LED light fixtures that will be dimmable. So we will be able to raise and lower the light levels within the area. We'll also obviously have stage lighting, sound system, and things of that nature within the overall facility itself. So again, we're talking about the description that I used in the first meeting was a building that's very utilitarian. Obviously, it will be metal siding on the outside. It will be concrete, polished concrete floors on the inside. We will have finished walls on the inside, but we'll also have some exposed insulation. But I can share with you that the direction of churches recently, my experience has been, and again, I don't mean to point to what we experienced living in Richmond, but obviously it was getting away from a very traditional structure. As a matter of fact, the ladies that went to the event in Richmond, I think it was last year, if I'm not mistaken, down in Chesterfield, that was an old shopping center that The Rock purchased and is utilizing for a church. And that's not unusual within that environment. And a lot of the newer churches were very similar to this in terms of the overall design, in terms of being very pragmatic or very utilitarian. Also I should also mention, as I'm going through my mind on the questions that were raised, we will have chairs. Obviously, it will be portable seating that will be arranged very similar to this on the inside, stackable chairs, so that you can pull those out and open up the space completely. We have storage, which will be able to take those, which is off to the side. It's not incorporated within the overall floor space of the area itself. So we can go ahead and pull the chairs out or bring tables in or do whatever we need to in terms of the overall space. In terms of the questions, I think most of them. Yeah.
Couple clarification points, Paul. Just things you said the other night, though. The bathrooms and the nursery will both have more like this, a drop ceiling.
I'm sorry, yes,
and carpet. And the nursery will have carpet. Everything else will not have carpet, but that will have carpet. So just in case there's concern there. I want to answer a couple questions that have already been asked, and then we'll do questions here with you guys. We are prepared to handle any sound treatment issues that we'll have. I realize I'm not wearing my mic anymore. I'm sorry. I'm really... We are prepared to have expert opinions on sound treatment to handle, but we are also not, it's not as big of a concern as you might think in a space like that. We tested out some things in that space we were able to visit, and we are confident that with some fairly simple sound treatment, we'll have good control over our sound. Let's see, he said the offices will remain in this building. That's something I did not mention earlier. We are not, again, that space needs to be as useful as possible on Sunday mornings and also flexible for the week. So the offices will remain in this wing over here. And another question that continues to come up, and it's a good question, is would we have 3 services? No, we would not begin with 3 services. We would likely begin with 2 because we would have the space to grow into those services. Did anybody have any written questions? I'll start with that. Okay. And here's what we're doing. Originally, we weren't going to take live questions, but we can take live questions. But I'll also take a written question if you want me to. If you want to ask it live, you can. Yes. Right. Right. Sure. Yes. So we have thought about that, and we are talking about some alternative options to make that more functional for those that are serving in there. Also keeping in mind that I'm sorry, I'm supposed to repeat the question. That was my idea. Thank you guys. The question was, have we thought about creating some way to make the restroom situation for the nursery easier so they don't have to go out and take kids to the bathroom? We're working on some possibilities of what would work there, but yes, that is on our radar, and we do understand that important. What is our current interest rate with CFR? How much do we owe them now? I can get you that number. I do not have it on me right now. It is less than $130,000, and I don't want to tell you the wrong number. And the interest rate is, Todd, you don't know that number, do you? Whoever asked this question, ask me later and I will be glad to tell you. I do not want to ignore your question, but I do not have that number in front of me. All right, how will youth, keep in mind, if any of you are better at answering these, I'm bringing you up. How will youth parents expect to drop off kids, walk back and forth, or drive through drop off? We are working on that plan to make sure that for both age groups, it is as safe and effective as possible. So I cannot directly answer that question to you, but I can tell you that is one of the big things we are working on logistically on how that drop off would work to make it safe. Will there be any easement adjustment requirements on the main road for entry or exit? That sounds like Paul.
Thank God, no. We do have, and I will share the one thing that I did get into. I didn't know if the question would come up. If you're all familiar with construction of any extent, you know that getting approved site plans is an extremely arduous process. And not to keep alluding back, when I was in Richmond, I did obviously quite a bit of construction in Richmond. It would usually take us 9 months. Fortunately, it only took us 2 months, and I picked up the approved set of site plans. We had the meeting on Wednesday. On Thursday, I went by the engineer's office. I have an approved set of site plans, and VDOT did not require us to do a turn lane. I can tell you I prayed diligently that they would not require that, because we're probably talking about $250,000 just to do that one aspect. So I know that was a long answer. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and I forgot, and I don't mean to take up the time, I've also talked about the electrical subcontractor about putting this big clock on the back wall of the assembly area so that whoever is speaking, they can see exactly how. Wait,
don't walk away. Paul. Come back. Current easement requires zigzag traffic pattern. Any consideration on moving easement to far southwest end of lot? We didn't really have, that wasn't really an option, was it? To move our entrance?
Whoever asked the question, you're talking about the easement that, originally this was 2 parcels. It was the 5-acre parcel here, and then there was another 5-acre parcel on the back side, which you cannot have a piece of property that is landlocked. And there was an easement which runs up the side of the property right here. If whoever asked the question, if you could confirm that. In future design, everything, essentially the part of the process we went through was also taking a look at a master plan. And that was the one thing I talked about for future considerations. We knew that anytime you're dealing with a facility like this, there's 2 components. There's the space you need and the money you have. You know, you have 10 pounds of flour in a 5-pound bag many times. And we were trying to get as large a facility as we potentially could. We realized, and we talked to that extensively also, that coming in, you're going to go around, go to the parking lot. Obviously, it'll be somewhat of an inconvenience initially. We're going to try to do some things, especially at the front entrance, to ease that up, because the constraints there in terms of the turning radiuses are so tight. So we're going to try to ease that up a little bit, do some things during the construction, maybe eliminate one of the parking spaces on the one side, which makes it a little bit easier. That is a potential future consideration of maybe moving the access lane in that area, which would obviously give you more flexibility and everything else. But again, the cost associated with that initially, just to give us that component, the trade-off with doing that as opposed to getting as large a facility as we could was obviously not part of the discussion and everything, because we're probably talking about, this is off the top of my head, we're probably talking somewhere in the area of maybe 60, 80, maybe even $100,000 just to do that aspect of it. So, yeah. A good question. Yeah.
Stay here. These are all you. There's a question about a covering over the front entrance to be used by handicap or elderly folks getting into the building, not having to worry about inclement weather.
Some of the constraints we had to deal with, obviously we have there's a dedicated easement associated with the drain field and the septic system, which is on the back part of the property. We also have a dedicated easement associated with a well on the backside. So the one thing that we tried to do was locate the new building in as close to proximity as we could to the existing to facilitate the movement between the two. In the course of doing that, we had to put it in a location where we couldn't offset it from the current location anymore. So when I was working with the engineers, we looked at if there was a way that we potentially could do that, and there really was not a way that we could integrate that feature with a drop-off simply because of the tightness of the access roads and everything else. Did I explain that?
But there still will be a covering there. It just won't be the drive under like this.
That's
building.
right. We do have a cover at the very front. It'll be an 8x8 canopy. It'll be on the two sides, but there will not be a drive-through that you'll be able to go underneath or anything else. Again, it was from the aspect of the constraints we were dealing with in terms of location and everything else.
Yes.
And understand that, yes. But you're correct, yes. There is not a mechanism in place to allow covered area to pull in under to get out in inclement weather and everything else. That's correct, yes.
Still you. Heat efficiency with concrete floors and the high ceilings. Do you have concerns about heat efficiency?
No. Did you leave the...
It's in there, yes.
Go all the way through. Go past the question slide. There you go. The one thing that we're going to utilize, and I don't know how many are familiar with it, and there are things which you can put in there. They're called duct socks. And I don't know if you're very familiar with that or not, but this is a photograph that I took from a facility that we completed recently, and there are the best case for it. Obviously, the word sock is a very good description. It's a soft material that has perforations on the side. To be quite honest with you, the one issue that I have a lot of times in a high bay facility like that is with directional diffusers, if I get them out the word, directional diffusers, where you're sitting underneath of it simply because of the velocity of the air that has to come out of that to get down to the floor level and everything else. There's a lot of air that comes out, and sometimes you can almost feel your hair blowing and everything else. What the duct sock does, it has these perforations on the side, and it disperses the air out across the length of the duct sock. Heating a facility like this in terms of the high area and everything else is not unusual within the environment. It's no different, again, that you have in a facility, and I realize it's completely different because you're not sitting in it, but it's no different than you have in any other commercial facility that has a high ceiling in terms of distribution of air and the velocity that is needed to get the air down to the floor and the heating. That is a long way of answering the question of, no, it's not an issue. Yeah. And I will also share with you the process we're using, and we're working with a contractor and been working with them during the whole process. The contractor, the mechanical subcontractor, and it's going to be Stroh-Snyder's. I don't know if you all are familiar with Stroh-Snyder's. It's an old family company. They did the original building here. They've been working with us during the whole course of it in terms of determining where the existing connection is into the septic system, where the water line comes in for the well, how we'll do all those connections and everything else. So they've been working with us during the duration. So I can share with you that we have an excellent mechanical subcontractor that's going to be working on this, and they're very familiar, obviously, with what we have, and they're very familiar with those systems and everything else.
At least for now. The roll-up door to the outside, many times wind blows against the door and shakes something like that, so it's not very airtight. What is being done to prevent that?
These will be commercial grade. Obviously, we're not talking about a resident. And again, when I say that, I'm not being not trying to be negative about what you may have and everything. These are commercial, weather-sealed overhead doors that they're not your typical, overhead door that you may be thinking about. They're insulated, absolutely everything else. They've got weather seals along the side and everything else. The one question also came up in terms of sound transmission, because we do have one between the lobby area and the assembly area. Somebody said, what about that wasn't brought up, but it was during the overall discussion and everything when we were talking about it. Sound transmission, I'm not going to tell you that you'll be able to not hear, obviously, when you stand, but if you stand on the other side of the wall, if you stand outside this wall, you're going to hear sound coming through. It won't be too much the sound transmission coefficient associated with those doors is not going to be any different than probably what you're going to have with the wall itself, with the sound attenuation blankets in the wall itself. Was that too technical?
Perfect. And the other question on here is, I can handle, is the baptistry. The question is, why aren't we putting in a permanent baptistry? When we purchased this baptistry to replace some of you may remember the very mobile baptistry, our goal was to be able to utilize this in the new space when that time came. The reasoning for that is this: again, it's about functionality and flexibility and square footage, and the requirements involved with putting in a permanent baptistry. We're going to create a space that was literally only usable for baptisms. And while that's exceedingly important, we can do a baptism in this anywhere we want to do it and keep it out in whatever space we need it in the room. And the upkeep with this versus the upkeep with that is also a significant savings. And so that was our thought process all along, was that having mobile square footage to be utilized for baptisms was much more responsible than permanent, only used for baptism square footage. Yes, sir.
I tend to look at things a little bit more from a security standpoint. What, if any, security improvements that was up there showing obviously on one entrance in. For those people to get out, they have to come through wherever.
No, there's an exit. There's an exterior door on the nursery.
Code requires,
I didn't see it on the drawing, so I apologize.
code requires exit, just like we have one out in the area. Out in toddler space, there's an outside door.
Yeah, there is one. That's a great question. Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's what that little tiny line at the bottom.
Yes.
Okay. So anything other from a security standpoint that's being thought about with this new space?
We have, and a lot of you maybe don't even necessarily know this, we have a fairly large team of security, or our safety team, that oversees Sunday morning safety. There is always multiple people on duty, keeping an eye on things, and we are working on the new plan that will integrate both with expert leadership on that team. So all of those things we are taking into account for sure. A question that was asked on Wednesday, there was a question about check-in as far as nursery toddler being separate from this building. That check-in will happen there at the room, and we'll work on the detail of that as well. But those kids will still be checked in and out in a safe way. They obviously won't be checked in over here. So, yeah, that's something we are working on, something we're very cognizant of, and are working on the plan for the two-building system, where people will be stationed on duty, all of those things from a safety standpoint. Yes, ma'am. That's fine. Correct. So there are 4 stalls in each of those restrooms, and that is the requirement we have, right? Correct, Paul?
It's actually a lot more than what is required.
So the question was, how many restroom stalls are in this building? There are 4 in each restroom. Paul's response, in case you couldn't hear it, was that actually is above the requirement. I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but not everyone goes every time they come. And honestly, creating more space in the restroom was just not, in the floor plan, we tried to keep to above the requirement, but not gigantic. You got a better answer than that?
I'm trying to find out the most diplomatic way to answer this. One of the gentlemen that I worked with, and I apologize, my wife knows that I have a tendency to tell stories at times and things of that nature, but one of the gentlemen I worked with over the years, and and we had a lot of discussions with groups and various groups and everything else, and I loved what he used to say. He said, and obviously using a church as a metaphor for any building, but he said you can't design every church for Easter Sunday. And the point to that is that you can't have all the parking that's going to facilitate an Easter Sunday. You can't have restroom facilities. You can't have everything, because if you did, you would essentially have a facility that would just absolutely blow the scope and blow the budget and everything else. You have to be reasonable in terms of the overall number that you're looking at in terms of facilities such as that. The one thing that we did very cognitively is that the restrooms are designed so they could, if indeed you had a women's conference here and it was strictly women, you could have both restrooms which could be utilized by women simultaneously. And obviously we could have the signage on there, which, you can move it back and forth to say men or women or do whatever you need to do. But essentially there are, and not to be absolutely crude or anything else, but the men's toilet, they do not have any urinals in there. They're all stalls and all the toilets, which obviously some of the guys may not like that, but that works best in a facility like this because, again, it gets to the flexibility and the use of the space. It gives you the greater flexibility associated with that. What I tried to do in terms of doing the overall layout was come up with a reasonable number of facilities relative to restrooms and things like that, relative to a size like this. Does that mean that there will not be a line for all the women especially, which, again, not to discriminate between the two aspects and everything else, the genders, but on a Sunday morning there may be. But again, if you had a number of restrooms that would facilitate that need fully, we would have half the foyer with nothing but restrooms in them. And I'm not saying that jokingly, but that pretty much what you would need to facilitate, obviously, a need such as that. So.
Yes, ma'am. You're okay. Mm-hmm. We will primarily utilize the side entrance of this building, tentatively speaking, and so this becomes kind of the L-shaped hub of everything, and so the distance is not significant, and so my assumption is parents will prefer to park in this side of the lot. People without kids will park all the way over there. So you can drop off, and if you want to park closer, you can park closer, or you can drop off here, drop off and go. The entrances will kind of be open to each other in that way that this becomes the hub. Does that make sense? So the question was, if you were watching online, the question was drop off, the walk back and forth, where they're going to be dropped off in this building, and so that will be that way. Thank you. Color of buildings, will they match?
My recommendation has been to the leadership is that obviously this building has more of a vanilla or cream color siding. My desire is that one has more of a dark gray or a slate color, primarily because one thing, again, we talked about during the planning committee meetings is that this building from the road really establishes the image of New Life Christian Church on the property. It's not that this building will be of greater importance or anything else, but because of the position of the property, you won't be able to see it as clearly from the road. This is the image that you'll see on the property. So it really establishes, again, it establishes the images for the church, obviously because of the steeple, the configuration, and things of that nature. My desire into using, and have done that previously in the past, is use more of a bronze color or slate color. It has a tendency more to disappear within the landscape itself. It's not that we would not want to use a cream color, but I think something that would be more conducive would be the slate color for the building itself. I think it would work aesthetically much better on the site. It would work better in conjunction with this and absolutely everything else. So obviously that's one thing that we have not fully decided on. Obviously, we still have a little bit of time and everything else. Also want to get some samples to share with the leadership and everything. But that is my recommendation in terms of the color of the new building. Now, the inside, we have not talked about the colors on the inside. We still have quite a bit of time associated with that. So I'm sure there'll be some type of committee to make a determination as to, what color black will be used or whatever. But I'm only kidding when I say that. But the other thing that I want to mention, and I apologize. The one thing that I have found in the design of facilities such as this and having multiple buildings on the site, and not to get too much in my experience, I've spent the majority of my career in the design of educational facilities, K-12. It seems that we can sit down and we can talk about how things will work out in terms of drop-off, working back and forth to the greatest extent possible. And I can tell you that about 99 and 49/100% time that when you get in it, you start using it, it gets changed. And I know Mark has used school facilities over the years, and I'm sure he's experienced that over the years also, that once you get in it and you start using it, you find out what really works the best. And obviously there's going to be a process that will go through. I'm not implying that Craig and Gavin and Anthony won't have their stuff together and how it's all going to work. But once you start working, you find things that work much better in terms of drop-off and how it works and functions and everything else. So that's going to be just getting a comfortable process and finding out what works best for everything.
I want to be kind to our children's ministry volunteers who are watching kids right now. And so these guys are all going to, and myself, we will all stay up here as we close. And if you've got additional questions, we would love the opportunity to address those questions. Just pick one of us that you think might know the answer, or you can wait in line for Paul. That would probably work too. But one thing I will tell you is we're going to take all of these questions that we can from both events and from our online version tomorrow night and compile them into a frequently asked questions. Yes, sir. Mike.
As a matter of fact, when Craig finished talking, I was going to get Evan very close. I realized that we didn't. Received an updated cost estimate last Tuesday. The contractor, as I mentioned, we have the site drawings finished. I'm still waiting on the site contractor to give me his price. That's probably going to be ERNF, which is a very good site work contractor in the area. He's going to be doing the site work more than likely. My desire is that we have the congregational meeting on April the 11th. What I am recommending to the leadership is we sign the contract on April the 12th, and we start construction the 1st of May. And it's going to take approximately 12 months, so by May of 2022, we'll have the facility finished and be able to occupy at the latest.
So if you've got questions and you'd like to come up and chat with somebody, please feel free to do so. The last thing I want to share with you before we close, you do have that prayer card in your bag, and you may wonder what that is about. Coming up the weekend of Commitment Sunday, which is March 28th, on the Friday and Saturday that precedes that Sunday, we're holding a 24-hour prayer marathon. And so from 6 p.m. Friday until 6 p.m. Saturday, our goal is to have someone praying at all times in 15-minute increments. And so we're looking for 96 people to take a 15-minute shift, and in that 24-hour period, then we will be praying constantly. And so we'll be giving you some guidance for the prayer time, some options, providing that week's most updated prayer request list. But we've also given you these cards because if something comes to mind, something comes up, something you would like people to pray about during that time, whether it's about this plan or not, we would love for you to have that extra opportunity to submit that prayer card, and you can put it in one of the offering boxes or on the table on the link anytime in the next couple weeks. And we want to include all of that in what we send to everybody who will be praying during our 24-hour prayer marathon. My encouragement to you would be, even if you can't take or don't get a chance to take one of the slots in the 24 hours of prayer, I would encourage you to pray, commit to praying at least 15 minutes during that time frame anyway. And so we want you to pray for the campaign in the future, but we also want to be praying for one another. I want to thank you for giving up your time tonight. Again, we will hang out up front, but I want to be kind to Gavin and his volunteers. I'm thankful to those who served that way, those who volunteered at both of these events. Thank you so much for your input and your time and your willingness to serve in that way. Thank you all for coming and for asking questions. Again, please do not hesitate to keep asking questions, even if it's not tonight. we will answer them to the best of our ability. But I want to thank you for being here. Let's stand and we'll pray together. God, thank you for this time that you've given us to spend some time in worship and celebrating what you've done, but also looking forward to the future. And God, I pray that you would continue to guide our process and our planning, that this would not be any one individual idea, but would be where you have led us as a community to move forward in faith in this way. And God, we know that no matter what, even the perfect building doesn't matter if you're not behind it. And so we're thankful for you and your strength in our lives and in our church. And God, I'm thankful for each person here who gave up their evening tonight to come and be a part of this conversation. I pray that you'd bless us all as we go. Keep us safe until we're together again. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.